Yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Gotcha.
Okay, guys, I appreciate my coming today. Since Rick and I sat down, along with Baron and the whole team, trying to figure out what are topics we can bring to you guys. Not always just Brian talking and drawing me up front and trying to 3 hours, but things that are direct farming related. Or ag adjacent here that we can help you guys be smarter, understand more about what's going on, not only today, but think about tomorrow. Taxes are always a big part of that. How can we capitalize on our investments, take advantage of our tax structures and all that? So the Boa Safra.
Boa Safra, yep.
Boa Safra.
We had one that said, hey, I've got this. What do you guys know about it? Over the past couple of years, as time's gone on, I said, you know what? Let's just reach out to them and see if they come up and do one of our lunch word series here. I said, absolutely, let's do this. So this has been a great opportunity here. I hope you all learn a lot about this today. And bottom line, ask questions.
Yeah.
When I talked to Bryce and Bruce here, one thing they said was, I want to make sure we can have all the interaction you guys want to understand the process, understand what's going on, how you can capitalize on this. So with that being said, I give you the picture. Perfect.
You got it. You got it.
Guys, please. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll start off with introductions. My name is Bryce Rollbeck. I farm in Western Iowa with my family. So family farm, 5th generation farm, grew up there, back farming as well. And actually did some farming in Brazil, went to college there, did some farming in Africa and came back to the family farm. And Boa Safra started when I bought my first farm. So I was looking for ways to increase the ROI of that first purchase. And late one night, I was reading through some articles from Iowa State. I talked to an individual that had done this and came up with the idea. I understood fertility soils. There's a lot of value in that soil. There's a lot of fertility in that soil. So how the code was written, section 180, it got me thinking. And we did this on our farm 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, and started Boa Safra and understood the value to farmers. So we professionalized that business and brought it forward here today. So turn over to Bruce to do an introduction. He joined us as a CFO about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm a farm kid from Dawson County, Nebraska. Grew up in agriculture, chasing hogs and cattle and a few sheep for 4-H and all the chores, those other duties as assigned you get as a kid. You got to scoop the bunks and everything. But we had, when I graduated college, it was, $1.79 corn and 16% interest rates. And I had to go find something off the farm to support my farming habit. And I kind of ended up in ag lending and spent a lot of years in that business. But, and in the course of that, I had gotten to meet these guys, Bryce and Tyler Brook out of Nebraska. And when they came calling, it didn't take me too long to figure out I should get on board. So happy to be on the team today. We've, we just have fun telling people about how to lower the overall cost of owning ag real estate.
So Boa Safra is actually Portuguese from my time in Brazil. It's good harvest. And so we use it as a good harvest for harvest and tax deduction. So that's the section 180 utilizing for farmers and harvesting that. So one of the things we just threw in the last week, this isn't in our normal slide deck show, but it really tugs at the strings of my heart and common sense and everything else that we were born and raised here in the Midwest. But as you can see, the waste in Washington, where we send our tax dollars, 520 million for ESG in Africa, 45 million for scholarships in Burma. I mean, we could just read in, this thing goes on and on. We just picked some of them that came up today. But the point of putting this up here is, look, we're obligated to pay taxes. It's our legal duty, but we don't have to leave a tip. We should use every available means legally to lower our taxes, keep it in our communities, keep it with our families, where it is responsibly used, where it is helping people and benefiting people. So this isn't to say that we shouldn't pay taxes. This is to say we should, as legally as we can, not pay as little tax as possible and not leave a tip. Bruce, you got anything to add on this one?
No, I just, it's interesting because statistically, Schedule Fs don't really ever show a lot of profit on them. You know what I mean? We've got a lot of tools in agriculture to deal with, when you have a good year, because there's probably a lean year coming. So we'll defer sales or we'll prepay something or we'll buy a piece of equipment. This is just another toolkit in that bag, right? And it happens to also reduce your overall cost of owning ag real estate. Because, using this type of deduction, you get about a 10 or a 20% discount on your real estate in the form of income tax deductions.
So we've worked with over 4,000 landowners now, and our average tax savings is about $1,700 an acre of a deduction. And we'll dive into what that means, but just give you guys an idea of where our starting point is, and we'll dive into the details of this in the upcoming slides. So to dive in deep into the actual tax code, this is where we started with section 180. And section 180 is for farmers that buy land and purchase land. So there's two things that we're going to talk about today: is farmers that buy land and farm the land, and then investors that buy land but don't farm the land. So there's two different scenarios there, and they act differently. Section 180 is for the farmers, and the benefit of section 180, it's right above section 179. So you can go read it. You can Google it. Your CPA can pull it up. It's going to be in the tax code. It's going to read. Those aren't the exact words. It's a little bit longer, but it's not much longer than what is up there. Section 180 allows you to deduct the cost for soil nutrients at the date of purchase. So you purchase a land and it has grain bins. It's got tile. It's got fences. Normal deductions. The soil fertility says in section 180. You can take that and classify it as an asset and value it. What we do at Boa Safra is the value side of it. And you can deduct that because you're going to utilize those nutrients, you're going to replace them. You're going to utilize the grain bin, you're going to replace it. You're going to utilize the shed, you're going to replace it. It all has a value. That's what section 180 says. And the value of being a farmer, section 180 is you can take it all in the first year. If you're not a farmer, it comes down to section 611, 167, 168. That allows investors or non-farmer landowners to utilize this deduction, but they have to utilize it over a period of time. They can't utilize it all in the first year. Bruce, you got?
Not too much. I mean, it's normally, farmers and ranchers, the section 180 is a little bit more generous in the way they let you handle that deduction. It usually just comes off as one item, and it's a lot of times it'll just show up on a Schedule F under the fertilizer expense when you buy a piece of real estate. If it creates a net operating loss, which because these are big deductions, they normally would, that net operating loss just gets carried forward until future earnings eat it up. So it's a pretty simple handling in terms of filing it. But when you get into the investor types, the threshold there is, the difference between active income and passive income. So active income, if you're the operator, if you're managing the property or managing the operation, you can use section 180. If you're an investor and your ag income is passive, you can only use this type of deduction to offset passive income. So it typically kind of limits that out and it gets spread out over several years.
We'll stop there. Any questions on section 180, where it comes from? It's in the tax code. You guys, after this, you can all Google it and read it right in the tax code. One of the things I guess I'll bring up before the question is it's been around since 1960. It's passed by House and the Senate in 1960. The reason it hasn't really been used since now is there's two reasons. 1960 ground was a couple $100 an acre. Fertility was very low at that time. So the value of doing this was very low. It really comes when we do our data, 2009, 2010, 11, ethanol picked up, corn picked up, fertilizer went through the roof, stills through the roof. That's when the value started becoming apparent in this. We've met people that have been doing it in the 90s, 2000s too, just on a small scale, doing it. But this is in the tax code since 1960. And the reason why a lot of people haven't heard of it, the tax code is 76,000 pages long. It's 42 feet high if you put in a book, 3.5 stories. Not everybody's going to know every section of the code. We don't know every section of the code. We know this one very well. That's what we specialize in. So.
Yeah, a little bit of this has been around a long time, but it hasn't been used for a long time. And even today, when we do what we call hindcasting, like if you bought something in the last 15 years, we can help you with that. It's not so much that we couldn't go further back. It's that, if we go out and take your soil data today and say the ground was bought in 2015, we're going to have to go out there and collect, 10 years of, crop and yield history, any soil amendments that have been done, so we can adjust that back to that original nutrient load. Okay, everything we do in our reports is directed toward giving you the proper deduction amount for the acquisition date. Okay, so we have to work our way through those intervening seasons between today and when you bought the ground. Well, when you go back too far, I mean, go back further, I should say, in front of the corn ethanol expansion, you're going to do more intervening season, collecting all that information, and you're chasing a number that just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So you end up, at a point where it just isn't worth the effort. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. So that's why we kind of tell people 2010 and forward is really where economically there's a good value for going after that.
Soil test.
Yeah, you can, if you've got soil, like you buy a piece of ground, you do a grid sample on it, yeah. We have to have, I mean, for us to use it in our system, it's got to have macros and micronutrients analyzed in it. It's got to have the geolocated probe points where the soil samples were taken. It's got to be delivered to us in a CSV file. But yeah, it's a great point, Gordon. You can have, the ideal time to call us up is after you close on the property and before you start putting anything on it. Okay, we'll get that. That's kind of the perfect window to get that soil data reading, and we don't have to do any adjustments. But the adjustments, you've hired agronomists, obviously, to go out and say, hey, I want to grow, 200 bushel corn, or maybe here it's more like 270 bushel corn on my farm. And they'll go out and do some soil work, and they'll come back with a prescription says you need to apply this, this, and this, if you want to have that kind of yield potential on that farm. Well, we're using the same type of soil science, okay, to figure out these original nutrient loads. We're just doing it in reverse. Okay, we're going to take the soil work now, work back through your crop production records and applications, and get to that original load.
Now to get into, I guess, sorry, go back. We'll give a chance for questions here on any of the codes, anything we talked about, or anything on your mind. It's good to ask now. There's no question out of bounds, no question that you can't ask. CPAs will ask them, so we expect any questions. So
Macronutrients, not micronutrients. How does that impact, I guess, the overall financials?
yeah, so your macronutrients, and we'll show a slide on this a little bit later, but I'll answer your question now, is $800, $900, and your $800 to $1,000, and then your micros are $400 or $500, and that's being conservative. You saw our 1,700 doesn't add up to there, but that's a conservative answer to that.
Yeah, you just don't want to overlook the micros because they are nutrients. They're part of that nutritional package that's used in the crop production, and they're 30 to 40% of the value of the deduction. So don't overlook them. So.
And I'll add that most labs run the micronutrient test. They just don't report it. Because we're not.
Interesting.
A simple call to the lab and say, oh yeah, we've got that. We just don't send that out because that's not the packaging all. But their extraction methods, they're taking all of that.
Interesting. Yep.
About WRP, CRP, woodland ground, what would that come under the section 611 depletion like force?
So it's a good question, and I'll go through. I'll answer the question because we have it on this slide. So to reiterate the question, what is available, or what can you use this on? And he asked about woodland, CRP, grassland. So any CRP is not in this, and the reason why is because CRP, you're not utilizing the nutrients, taking them off. You're getting funded by the government to sit there. So if you're not utilizing the nutrients in a farming method, such as cattle, grapes, we've done almonds, we've done timber that is harvested they have a plan to harvest it. So anything in ag that you are taking nutrients off in an agriculture fashion, it can be utilized. One of the other things, hunting, we have a lot of people call us, that is not we don't recommend doing it for hunting because you're not taking nutrients off, you're not using it for agriculture means. So that answer the question?
Yeah, the land just has to have a production use.
Yep.
So if you think about, grazing, haying, row crops, permanent crops, anything that has a production use will both qualify.
Cow calf.
Yeah.
So
Cow calf, yeah.
you're doing section 180, but like section 11 depletion, like in forest land.
So we don't do it on forest land. There might be one for forest in the special tax code for forest. We're using 611 for the agriculture side of it. Yeah.
If it's soil related, we can help because if they're like harvesting pine straw, or if you're grazing forest lands, But if you want to like get your depletion calculation or your depreciation deduction on forest lands, we've got guys that we know that come out and they'll do those timber estimates. You
Yep.
know, and that's the guy that you want to have value the standing timber
Yep.
for this type of deduction.
Yep. 611, the other where people probably know where it's, so it was built for the oil company. So they use 611. When they deplete the minerals out of the ground, they deduct them just as a farmer would. So. All right, going into the qualifications. So purchase, exchange, or inherited. And a good rule of thumb for those is if the basis changes. So anytime the basis changes, this deduction comes into play most times. And one of the good things I go over here is, actually it's one of the negative things of this is you buy ground for $10,000, you take a $1,500 deduction, your new basis is $8,500. So if you're going to buy land, sell land in the same year, this isn't probably worth your time to do it because you're going to have to recapture that. 95% of our customers hold it for a lifetime and pass it on to their kids with a stepped up basis. So just a quick one there. Ranch land, crop ground, timber ground, all available if they're used for ag. And there's 2 buckets here. The easy one is any ground purchased in the last 3 years. And the easy bucket on that one is because you amend your taxes. You don't have to go back on a 3115 is what the form calls and change your taxes. So just doing a simple amendment in the last 3 years. So if you bought in the last 3 years, tax years, it's a pretty easy change on your taxes to go back. And land after those 3 years is that 3115 we see there. It's not difficult, it just takes a little bit more work. A little bit more prone to an audit because people are supposed to see that going through the IRS. They don't see every one of them, and audits don't scare us anymore. We've been through them. So we're not that worried about if you did get audited. We have the law, we have our processes, and we've gone through audits, and we'll get into that a little bit. But two buckets, last 3 years, pretty easy. If you go back past the 3 years, it's just a different CPA process that has to go on. Bruce, you got anything?
Yeah, the 3115 form is just basically a correction form. It says, hey, we overlooked something. You know, if you forget to file a depreciation or add a tractor to your depreciation schedule, it happens, you know what I mean? So it's just a correction form for a year that's just beyond the 3-year window doing an amended return. What was it? Oh yeah, on the basis change, you know, normally that's when, you know, I sell Gordon a piece of ground and he gets a new basis in that ground based on what he paid for it and so forth. But that also can refresh, as Bryce mentioned, in a stepped up basis. So if you've received land through a bequeath and you got a stepped up basis, or if you're planning your estate and you make sure your beneficiaries get a stepped up basis, that resets the clock for these deductions. And as you think about that estate planning process, your beneficiaries are going to be going through a lot of tax calculations when that estate becomes effective. And it might be nice to have a deduction available to them in that process as well.
Any questions on this slide or what we talked about?
Does everybody understand what stepped up basis is? Any questions on that? It's kind of your get out of jail free card on capital gains when you inherit property. Yeah.
Can an owner, can 2 different owners deduct this on one piece of property when it's?
Yeah, we just split it between the two because
I mean, in other words, this guy owns it, he goes out and does this, and then he sells it. Can the next guy get?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. You buy the ground, you're paying for the nutrients in the ground, right? That's how we price ag real estate, right? What's the production value of the ground? Yeah. No, it's a great question, Gordon. I should have touched on that,
Yep.
but it's, yeah.
Yeah, so to walk you through that process, the first owner would take it. He owns it, he sells it to you, he recaptures it because he sells it, then you would take it. Yep.
Yeah, Uncle Sam knows he's gonna get his tax sooner.
Yeah.
When he sells, it's his basis what he bought it for, or you deduct whatever you got out of it.
Yeah, it's gonna be what his purchase price was less any deductions he took, including this.
Yep.
So he's gonna have a higher capital gains when he sells it
Yep.
to the next person, see? So Uncle Sam's a very patient partner, you know? He'll hang with you your whole life, I guarantee it.
So that's where we go back. If you're gonna buy a piece of land and sell it in a year or 2 years, whatever that calculation has to be, then you don't want to do this probably more than likely. you get a stepped up basis.
If you make sure that your beneficiaries get a stepped
Yeah.
up basis, that doesn't always happen. So talk with your estate planning people about that.
Yep.
But stepped up basis just means that your beneficiaries get a new basis at market value, right? When
This 17.
it does, it refreshes the clock, and your kids or your whoever the beneficiaries are can do this again on that same parcel.
So in that case, doesn't.
It doesn't penalize you in the case that
Right.
you're saying. If you had an estate planning where your kids didn't get a stepped up basis, then it would.
Yeah.
Then it would, yeah, yeah. It could hurt them, but you're holding that money for 50 years rather than the government.
I understand.
Yeah.
State tax is 50%, your tax rate is 25%, that's a 25%.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some math on that end of it.
And while we're talking about basis a little bit, we've run into a few cases where people have done like 1031s, you know, and they've got like an old basis on a more recently purchased property. And if that basis is too low, say the value of the ground is maybe the 10 or 12 grand that you've got in this area, but you know, you 1031 an old property that maybe had $1,000 basis in it, you know, because it's an old basis. Well, 1031 just takes that old basis and puts it on the new property, right? Remember, Uncle Sam knows he's going to get paid eventually, so they let you do that. But what happens then, you come and have a deduction, you know, that's maybe $1,700, and now you've got kind of an effective cap on what you can use on the deduction because your basis is low on that property. So you can't deduct against a basis you don't have. So you've got to have enough basis in the ground to use the deduction.
Before you sign up with us and we go through the process, these are all the questions we ask and get answered before we do anything. So.
Yeah. We'll go through all that with you, and it's always a good idea. We coach everybody to engage your CPA or your tax person early in this process. Don't walk in with a report and say, "Here, I want to file this." Let's give them a chance to make sure they're ready for how this works too.
It brings us to the next thing. We have CPAs on staff that can talk to your CPA, go through the process, help them out, and work through that. But the other thing, one of the things that we always bring up is we've started 5,000 customers now, 49 states. The average deduction we've been through that we're over $2 billion in tax savings for the clients that we've worked with.
Does anybody know somebody farming in Alaska? We just need to get to 50 something.
Yeah.
So talking about qualifiers still.
Yep.
If I'm a tenant farmer and purchase that,
Yep.
that piece of property, even though I personally built the fertility, am I still able to capture that deduction?
Yeah, our position on that is yes, you can, because if you think that through, I know, and there's even some articles out there that tell us that doesn't work. But if you think about it, we're talking about two different types of deductions, right? We've got a deduction for the operator. We've got a capital deduction for the landowner. And when that tenant becomes the landowner, if they're, you know, they've paid for all the inputs over the years, harvested all those crops, right? The nutrients came off the ground in those crops. And then when they went to buy the ground, how do we price ag real estate? On the production value, right? I mean, so higher production farms bring higher prices. So when he goes and buys that farm, he's paying for the nutrition again, right? In that purchase price. And that's what Congress acknowledged in this part of the section. The code is, you know, your operator, you always get that deduction in the operating period. But when you buy that and you put the capital into it, there's a chunk of that too. That's a nutrient deduction. And it only happens once, right? Per tax basis, right? It only happens once, but you know, you get to deduct that. There's people out there, if you talk to somebody outside of agriculture and you tell them, hey, I can spend $500,000 on a tractor and use my bonus depreciation, write it all off in 1 year. And they're going, man, that sounds kind of shady. I'm not sure that's right. but you know, the reality is, you know, it does work. That's the way the code is written. And the same in this instance here, where Congress, you know, wanted to make sure that landowners had a way to deal with the higher cost of this higher production ground. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Exchange and purchase, do those two always stay together or can
You mean like if you trade a property or something, or? Well, for these purposes, yes, you just need to know what your tax basis is. Do you know what I mean? I would make sure you've got enough basis to use the deduction. Because you may be into one of those low basis situations if it's an old piece of property, you know, piece of property you've owned for a long time and you're exchanging it for another one. Yeah.
Just to throw a breakdown in here, across the United States, we see the difference in fertility values. The West is going to be higher because it doesn't rain. They don't lose many nutrients. The middle part of the country going to be about average, and then you're going to get lower to the Southeast where you get a bunch of rain, bunch of leaching of nutrients. And the Northeast, we don't have a lot of data up there, but it is a little bit higher. So just kind of give you an idea of where we're at in the country. We've done over 1 million some acres. 1.5 million acres. So we're getting pretty good data on what's coming in. So the Boa Safra process, how we've developed this starting back in 2019 when we did our first farm. I did a farm, Tyler did a farm. He is my business partner in this. We kind of blindly went through this and we read the code and we told our CPA he's going to do it. And so we fumbled through it. And what we said is we need to build a process that works with the IRS tax code as well as with farmers and the data that we have available. So the first thing that we do that's not on here is we want to make sure your CPA is comfortable, make sure they understand what we're doing, how it falls into the tax code, how it's utilized. Then step one of the process is come out and analyze the nutrients in your soil. So that's actually ground truthing it, that's going out and building that data that if the IRS ever audited you, we have it backed up, geo-referenced. And step two is we build the value of the nutrients using data from all over the country and data at the time of purchase. So if you purchased in 2021, we have data for that fertilizer in 2021 of July. And so we build that in, we have that back up in our report. If we're ever audited and they say, how do you come up with the fertilizer values or the fertilizer cost? We have that in the report. That report gets built in the nutrient values. And then step three, we have a report that's 5 to 10 pages long per field. We've done one field, we've done people that have 600 fields. And so that report varies in length, but has all that data in there. It's like that receipt. That receipt will give you the number of the value of the fertility from a third party Boa Safra. That will go to your CPA. The number will be on it that he or she should use in that deduction. And they'll file that. They'll keep that as a receipt if you're audited, which we'll go over the auditing a little bit here, a little bit later, but that is your receipt if you're audited. The audits that we've been through, 4 out of 5 of them, Bruce, we just handed that report in, no problem. We had a $45 million audit that took a little bit longer, a few more days that we had to go in and help the IRS understand the agriculture code. So been through audits. We have 5,000 customers. We've been audited 6 times now.
6 that we know of, yeah.
The average audit is about 0.5%. That's how many people get audited in the country each year. So we're way below that. And we're not getting audited because of what we're doing. We're just getting audited because we're working with so many people and it comes up.
Yeah, there's no indication that this causes any audits. We talked a little bit earlier about how, we tax plan at the end of the year. So we're really not displacing taxes necessarily paid to the IRS. We're just kind of putting another tool in that kit that you can use to manage your tax liabilities. And, and it's probably a little bit easier to handle than, buying another tractor or, doing some of the other things that we do at year end. So this is, if you own ag real estate, you've already got the capital out there. This just helps you harvest that tax deduction from the land that you already own. And if you're buying ground, it kind of goes into your calculus. If you can get a 10 or 20% of your purchase price back in tax deductions.
I guess any questions with the process? We're not going to sit up here and tell you it's rocket science. It's not. It's just kind of third-party verification of people putting it together that understand the law and the code, working with your CPA to be able to utilize this. So we're not doing anything that's groundbreaking. We just understand the code and understand the value of went out and been able to present it to farmers.
So there will also accept soil tests that are existing.
Yeah, but the only caveat we'll put in this because we're doing 1 million acres a year now. the data has to be good. We get a lot of farmers that send us in half data. It's written on a napkin or something like that. So we have to have good CVS data.
Yeah, CSV.
CSV,
in a
sorry, yep.
digital file, and, macros, micros, geolocated probe points, all that stuff's got to be in there. And to be real honest, I mean, we just, our system is tuned to this process. We're not out there trying to do agronomy prescriptions, that kind of stuff. We go out there and look at it one time for this purpose, and so generally, you get a little better data, a little better deduction if you use our data. So it doesn't cost you any more to have us come out and do the work, and you end up with a better number.
So just a couple ways customers use this: protect income, lower your overall tax liability, reduce the cost of ag real estate. And if you purchase ground knowing you have this deduction, it can help with the down payment, help with the overall cost of it. And then also just planning for the future tax estate planning. I've had quite a few individuals that get into that part of it as well. So looking at a test here, you can see these macros on a 71 acre field are about $1,100 and the micros are about $400. That'll change over the country and over fields of what that comes in, but gives you an idea of the values that we're finding there. And we'll go into a real life example next. Is one of our good friends out of Houston, has actually purchased ground in Iowa and Nebraska. Very wealthy oil guy, investing into land. Coming up here and purchasing very good ground. He purchased 656 acres. The average, we'll get into a little bit, but there's one of his tests. As you can see, 1,300, another 200 on that, or $1,528 an acre. And so with this macronutrients cost of 656, he had a $727,000 deduction and $156,000 deduction. So a total of $884,000. We'll get into the return for him. Total deduction of $884,000 on 656 acres, average of $1,346 an acre. His taxable rate income is 40%. So his cash value is $538 an acre, $14,000 an acre ground, $539 cash value, year one at 3.85% return. So our cost to do everything all the way through is $40 an acre. He saw a return of 13 to 1. This is a real investor. Went through it 4 years ago. Very big CPA firms he works with. We go in and meet with them. We show them the code. We walk them through it. Signed up, got that return.
Yeah, we've actually worked with most of the major CPA firms around the country, and many, many local firms around the country. And once people understand it, even CPAs, once they understand it, they'll get on board because it's a very straightforward process. It's just nobody, one of the reasons this deduction hasn't been used in the past is because nobody kind of packaged it up in a reliably professional report that they know that the numbers are right. I mean, we do a lot of work in the design of how this business was built. There's like 3 levels of conservatism so that we're not, we're never overstating the numbers. If as an example, we only probed the top 6 3/4 inches of the soil. Well, you guys know the root zone's a lot deeper than that. But we also, on each parcel, will take one deep probe, and that probe just goes in our records. It doesn't go into the report. It doesn't get valued. But what we've found is if somebody doesn't like the $1,700 that we find in the top 6 3/4 inches, we ask them, they'd rather we file on the $4,500 that's in the 20-inch sample. You know what I mean? There's a lot of nutrient out there that we're not even putting in the report. So it's, that's just one of the features. We don't put a value on N, for instance, because that's a transient nutrient. And so, yeah, there's a lot of ways that we make it conservative and we still get good deductions for our clients.
Going back to that with the CPAs, so we work with over 1,200 CPAs. And actually, Indiana, Ohio is probably one of our best 2 states that we work in because we have so many CPA groups. They have a customer now, they just send us the field when they purchase it. We go through the whole thing, send it back to CPA. The landowner's not even involved in it anymore. We have 3 or 4 large firms in Ohio and Indiana that send us a lot of business doing that. So.
we go through this process and our CPA has questions, do they have access to someone like a call?
Yeah, we have two CPAs that are on retainer with us. One is Paul Neefer, if you've ever read the Farm CPA blog or that publication through CLA over the last 20 years. Paul is one of our consulting CPAs. Another one's Rick Richter out of Idaho. They've both done hundreds of these kinds of deductions over their career. And they've been very helpful for us to make sure we're on the right track too. But yeah, what we'll do is if you've got a CPA that's maybe not, on board, if you will, we can schedule a call with Paul or Rick, and get your CPA and one of our guys, and you can sit on the call or, however you want that to work, but they can just answer those questions and get that to work for you.
To go, Paul is one of those guys the government goes to figure out how to implement their own taxes. That's how good Paul is. And Paul is where a lot of the ag CPAs go to get their information about different things like this. So Paul's put out blogs. Your CPA probably knows Paul in terms of his name and what he does. So it's one of the things that we utilize to bring credibility to what we're doing early on. Now it's just helping out the education part of it. So you had a question?
Yeah, it's real quick. Logistics of it again.
Yep.
You were talking about, you can go back 3 years without an amended return, is that what you're saying?
With amended return, yep.
So you have to do, if you bought it in the past, you have to do it in the return.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
But you could probably, when you do it in the return, then you could,
Bring it forward.
you could bring it, you could actually expense it.
Yep.
You wouldn't have to depreciate it.
Yeah, are you an active income operator? Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, it's probably just gonna land on whatever return you file it.
Sure. So.
Yeah, so whatever, if you're like doing something from 6 years ago, say,
But
Yeah.
3 years ago, Bruce.
well,
Yeah.
if it's within 3
Yeah.
years, you just file the amended return.
Yeah.
And you'll get an adjustment, whether it's a refund or whatever,
Yeah.
from the IRS directly off of that amended return.
Does it work for like LLCs or K1 or S corps where you have a K1 and a pass through?
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who the
It's the
tax,
same thing, because then you have to have an amended return on the entity.
Yeah,
And then
an amended K1,
And then you
yeah,
have to have a different amended return.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
The easiest way to do is when you purchase it, but the value of doing it if you have a tax problem,
Yeah.
Yeah. it's a little tricky, but depends if you're talking about 40 acres or 300 acres. Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
if you go back, if you go more than 3 years.
Yeah.
Do the mechanics on that.
well, then because then you're beyond the 3-year look back for an amended return. So you've got to file this form 3115 that says, hey, we overlooked something on this past return and we're going to correct it on this return with this year's return. Okay. So it just becomes part of your current return, whatever that is.
Because you have to do amended return.
It,
Possibly. I mean, that's a kind of a CPA question, how you want to go about that, but yeah.
you're thinking on the right path. It just,
Yeah.
the only 3115, again, it goes back is a little bit more scrutinized by the government, which again, it doesn't matter to us what is scrutinized on it, but the amended taxes are less scrutinized. So
It doesn't sound like the IRS is going to be hiring any new people for a while. So.
Any advantage of going out there and say, I'm gonna spend this money today, have you analyze it, it just sits over there. Because at some point in time, we know we're all gonna pass the rate, like, okay, I don't know when that day is, but I've got a baseline, does that help us out at all?
It's not going to help any terms of I don't want to put this. You're just gonna have a peace of mind of knowing what it is. So until you're ready to use it, there's not a benefit of doing it later or now. It's whenever you want to utilize it, need it. Yep.
Well, I mean, if you make sure in your estate plan that those kids get a stepped up basis and leave instructions or whatever, they will be able to use this in that moment, because for them, that'll be the ideal moment, right? Because after the estate, settles out the ownership on the real estate and before they start doing the applications, we come in and do this and they get the deduction. So it's a nice package along with that estate planning, because they are going to have to file an estate return and all those different taxes and whatever those inheritance costs are. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yes. You can,
Whenever that basis changes,
Yep.
a rule of thumb. Yeah.
So So are there any examples, in other words, we all have, we got some of the best soil testers in the world that sit in this room. And everybody knows where they're at. Do you have us like, okay, well, can we plug it in to see if we're at 1,200 or 2,200?
You know, the ability to kind of calculate an estimate. If you've got it like a recent soil sample you want us to look at. We also probably have reports in the area. So if you just tell us like what county you're in or where you're at, we can find an indicative report that's nearby or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we can definitely give you a initial estimate. That's going to be
Yeah.
fairly decently close.
We have not found anything. I mean, what was it in the sugar sand in Florida that
Yeah.
got 80 inches of rain? It was like $700.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's on the deduction value. So
Values based on the recent increase in the nutrient prices, that's gonna make this more valuable.
No, the values on the day of purchase of the nutrients. So 2022,
yeah,
probably more valuable than today, but sometime down it drops the value, but it's still valuable to do no matter if it's 24, 21. 22.
Yeah. So we always drive everything we do to the acquisition date.
Yeah.
So, and that never changes, right? So everything we do in terms of valuations is going to be at the acquisition date. Yeah. Good questions. Got a thoughtful bunch here, guys. Yeah, good.
The biggest thing we've learned is, look, this is new. CPAs are by nature conservative, and they should be. And one of the issues with CPAs that we've ran into is their objective is to file as many tax returns and sign off as possible and have as least worries as possible. And so one of the things that we've always done is CPAs will say, this can't be true. I would have heard of it, would have been there. We tell the clients, go tell them to do the research and come back to you. So they'll go read it online. They'll say, suppose it playing out on section 180 online that what we just talked about here today. And they'll come back and say, all right, there might be something there. Let's talk to these guys. And so then we set up a meeting, we do the education part. And once they understand all the parts of it, how we're putting together the data behind it, we're batting about 95 to 98% with CPAs coming on board. If a few people that just won't do it, then they probably wouldn't do it if it was sitting right in front of them. But we've worked with over 4,000 CPAs now and 5,000 customers. So,
You know, I heard a story about Tom Cruise when he was planning, you know, he always does his own stunts, and he planned this on one of the Mission Impossibles where he kind of swings on the rope and crashes in the building in Dubai, you know, way up in the air. And he was explaining this whole thing to his safety guy and kind of what he wanted to do. You know, I want to swing around, kind of crash through the window and just barely make it. And the guy says, no, that's way too, we can't, it's never going to happen. We're never going to have that. So Tom Cruise says, well, so the next day I was talking to my new safety guy and and they did one of the most iconic scenes in movie history. So yeah, sometimes you kind of have to think about, you know, changes when you need to do something for yourself.
What's the downside?
Well, you do have a lower basis. So if you ever sell the property, you're going to pay a little more in capital gains, but that's a lower rate in the future versus offsetting ordinary income today.
Yep.
You know, there's a cost, it's a flat rate of $40 an acre. So however many acres it is, it's just a flat rate. There is that cost to it, but that's tax deductible too. So, you know, you're reducing income there too. What are the downsides?
that's about it. I mean, we're
I
not
mean,
we're not seeing audits anywhere near what the national level of audits are. So you're not opening stuff up to audits. You know, if you do get audited, it'll probably come up. It'll be a big deduction. They'll ask about it. We've been through them. It's mostly for us, just an educational point for the IRS tax agent that we've been through. So
yeah.
hasn't been a knockout. We did a $45 million one this 3 months ago for a large investor that bought land, and about 2-3 days of sending back and forth questions, answers to the IRS. Good to go. There's no adjustments. So.
And again, I mean, I don't know if it's a downside, but just be sure you engage your tax people early.
Yep.
We don't want you to do anything you don't understand. If we see anything that doesn't look like it's going to be of value to you, we'll call it out up front. But yeah, just be sure you don't, because we've had a couple cases that we know of where the CPA misfiled or, you know, kind of made a mistake in the deal, and then, you know, and then you're having to correct stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, of those 5-6 audits that we've been through, 3-4 of them were just filed wrong. They had ground that had, you know, $1,500 deduction on pasture, and they paid $1,000 for it, and they filed a $1,500 deduction. Yeah, that's going to get flagged and they're not gonna let you do that.
Question on the micro. The more you test, the more you get. In other words, is there extra that you can test for? Or do you
Well, we
just-
read everything that's there at the moment we take the sample. Is that your question? I'm
Oh,
not sure.
yeah. Do you have 5, you got 3, or you got 10? The
Oh,
micro-
no,
So yeah, I can answer that
Go
one
ahead,
first. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, you're talking, you can go down to selenium, to all those and get value. Our micronutrients are backed up by university, land grant university, what they say is necessary to grow a crop. And maybe in the future, all those littler ones that we don't have. So we're iron, boron, copper, magnesium, all the major microbes. We don't get into selenium and all those littler ones because there's not the data from the land grant universities that we use to back up our reports is not there yet for those. And they're not coming out and saying, you definitely need these to grow a crop. We probably know we do need them, but that data is not there. So that's why we don't keep going down the list on those.
Did I hear you say earlier you don't value nitrogen?
We value it. It just won't show up in there because your nitrogen is not going to stay around. So you'll see it on there. Most likely it'll be a 50 cents, $0, $1, something in there. Yep.
Just other questions? I think we've kind of touched on everything that I can think of, but
Just clarification of this topic. So if you think we'll go back 8 years, basically, because Graham did the sell for $1,500 an acre. But theoretically, if you paid that, then it'd be worth it. If you bought, let's just say you bought 2 years ago.
Yep.
And you had soil tests back 5 years.
Yep.
Well, how does that work?
So we'd take from the soil tests if they're complete and we could utilize them. We'd build in that data from 5 years back, not 10 years to the data purchase. So you have the, whenever you have good soil data is when you're going to build that back to the data purchase. Does that make sense? So let me ask your question, make sure I'm understanding it right. I bought a farm 10 years ago. I have soil data 5 years after I purchased it. So halfway, what did that be? 2014, you would have purchased the farm. So you have data from 2019. So we take that soil data and build it back from 19 back to 14 and put all those calculations in there to get the amount of nutrients that would have been in there at the data purchase.
So yes, that's an example of the last 5 years. And just use that and build it.
Yeah, but we'll need all your fertilizer and your yields yields taken off, fertilizer applied. And most times it's going to be a wash. People aren't really, unless you're going and putting 30 tons of cattle manure out or something, it's going to, most of the times it's not going to be that big a difference.
yeah, everything we do is going to be driven toward valuing it at the acquisition date.
Yep.
We've got to get there somehow. Sometimes if we've got good data, around that date, we can work with that. But the hindcasting works also. We can take
the livestock in there, if it's tested, and you've got verification of the test, and that's.
Yeah.
You got rates.
Yeah, we can use it. I think what he's referring to, we've run across some farms that guys bought that were maybe a dewatering pivot for a lagoon system or, a feed yard, a pivot next to it or a feed yard. So they're always like dumping stuff on there. And it wasn't necessarily putting manure on because they needed fertilizer. They just needed it out of the yard or out of the lagoon. So you get these big buildups of phosphorus and other materials in there that can make your deduction, $3,000. I mean, it can make it go way up. So, yeah. So you do get some outliers when you have those types of situations. Yeah.
But what
Right.
we got, one of the things that I know that both Bryce and Bruce said, when we got started here, they came in, typically we talk about 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, we'll take a little break. Lunch will be here shortly. And there's a lot more one-on-one conversations because everybody's situation is unique.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a couple notes I kind of put together here. Number one, I wrote down twice. Involve your financial team. Your tax preparer, CPA from step one to make sure, because that's how we can get everything lined up. Beyond that, your audit rate is less than the standard audit rate. That sure sounds like it's not throwing a lot of red flags up within the government, which is always a great thing. But outside of that, when you go to sell the ground, you'll be lowering your basis. So potentially higher capital gains in the future, whether that's next year, well, that's 50 years from now. But yeah, putting the working capital back in your hands now, worry about tax rates down the road, makes a lot of sense to me too.
Yeah.
So, guys, appreciate your time. They're gonna be
You bet.
ready to lunch as well, so as always, ask questions, we'll converse and see what we can do. So,
Thanks, guys.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be back with lunch any minute here now. Drinks over here, just grab a drink and get like this. Yeah, appreciate it.
Here's your picker. Do you want this back too? That's a clever little.
It's not cheap, but it works very well.
Yeah.
Come on.
There you go.